Hey everyone, welcome to the Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today. We are jumping right into General English 9, Unit 4, Lesson 1. Determine a theme or central idea and analyze its development, and compare and contrast universal themes. I know, it sounds like a massive mouthful, right? But don't worry, we are going to break the whole thing down together, step by step. By the end of this, you're literally going to be analyzing literature like a pro. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. First, learning universal themes. 2. Defining a universal theme. 3. Comparing themes across cultures. 4. Plot details versus deeper themes. 5. We'll test your theme analysis. And 6. We'll wrap up with a recap.
All right, Part 1, learning universal themes and developing a global perspective. You know, at St. Paul American School Clark, there's a huge emphasis on preparing you for success beyond the classroom walls by developing a true global perspective. And a big part of that is literature. When we read stories from all over the world, we might see completely different traditions or settings on the surface. But underneath all of that, cultures worldwide actually share these core human values. Developing this global perspective really just means learning to recognize the shared human experiences that connect us all, no matter where we come from.
So how do we actually build that perspective? Well, we've got 3 main goals today. First, you'll learn how to pinpoint a theme or central idea in a text. Second, you'll learn how to analyze exactly how that theme develops using specific details. And finally, you'll learn how to compare and contrast how completely different cultures approach these exact same themes. These are the crucial critical thinking skills that are going to open doors for you in high-level literature.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining a universal theme. What exactly are we talking about here? Let's look at the actual definition from our source material. A universal theme is an idea that applies to anyone, anywhere, regardless of cultural differences. Think about it. It doesn't matter if a story was written 1,000 years ago in ancient Greece or, yesterday in modern-day Tokyo. A universal theme bridges that gap of time and geography. It's the underlying message that literally any human being can relate to. To put that into perspective, let's look at some real examples you'll probably bump into all the time in your reading. Things like the struggle for equality, right? Humans have written about that for centuries. Or the loss of innocence, that tough transition from childhood into the real world. That's something everyone goes through. We also see stuff like the inevitability of fate, a community's confrontation with nature, or the tension between the ideal and the real. When you're reading a text, these are those massive, overarching ideas you're trying to hunt down. Here's the catch, though. Authors rarely just hand you the theme on a silver platter on page 1. They build it. So understanding how an author develops a central idea over the course of the story is absolutely crucial. It's a process. Step 1, the theme slowly emerges early on. Step 2, it gets shaped and refined by really specific details, maybe a particular word choice or the mood the author sets. And step 3, it's deeply developed through how the characters interact and how the plot moves forward. You've got to track these little breadcrumbs to truly analyze the theme's development. Let's dive into Section 3, comparing themes across cultures with a worked example. Okay, let's take 2 absolute classics, The Sword in the Stone and The Adventures of Robin Hood. We'll use these as our models. These are both fantastic, high-interest tales, but they come from entirely distinct cultural storytelling traditions and settings. At first glance, the surface-level stuff is totally different. In Text 1, you've got magic swords and mystical transformations. In Text 2, you've got archers running around medieval forests with a band of merry men. Honestly, if you only look at the plot, you'd probably think these stories have absolutely nothing in common. But we are looking deeper than that, and this is such a brilliant illustration of our core concept. Because despite having wildly different settings and characters, both of these texts are vehicles for the exact same universal themes. Both stories teach us lessons about bravery. Both explore justice, doing what's right for the greater good. And both deal with transformation, watching ordinary people step up and become heroes. Section 4, plot details versus deeper themes. Let's talk about avoiding some very common misconceptions. So there is a massive difference in how everyday students and strong analysts approach reading. It's super common for students to just compare surface plots, right? They'll write entire essays just pointing out the obvious, like how one story has knights and the other has archers. But strong analysts, they compare the underlying themes. They focus on the deeper similarities because they recognize that while the cultural traditions shaping the story are unique, the actual human value being celebrated is completely identical. And honestly, just summarizing the two stories side by side without making any connections, that's a weak analysis. A truly strong analysis means you have to explain how and why stories are similar, and you have to use concrete, relevant textual evidence to back it up. You literally have to pull specific phrases, character actions, and pieces of dialogue straight from both texts to prove your point.
Section 5. Let's test your theme analysis with a quick formative check. Wrap your head around this question for a second. When you read two different texts, how do you know which differences are cultural and which are universal? Well, the cultural elements are usually the setting, the specific traditions, what they're wearing, the geography. The universal elements, those are the raw emotions, the struggles, and the moral lessons the characters are experiencing.
And here is a fantastic follow-up to really test your grasp on theme development. How do those cultural settings actually influence the character's actions? Think about it. A hero in ancient mythology might face the wrath of the sea, while a hero in a modern sci-fi story might face the freezing void of space. The setting dictates how the conflict actually plays out for sure, but the underlying courage it takes to face that conflict, that remains a shared, universal theme. If we were grading your theme analysis right now, this is the exact rubric we'd be looking at for a highly effective answer. A top-tier analysis clearly identifies the underlying lesson both stories are trying to teach. It compares character traits and the conflicts they go through. It flawlessly supports that comparison with cited evidence from multiple texts. And finally, it recognizes both the unique cultural perspectives of the authors while simultaneously celebrating those shared human values. All right, we made it to section 6. Let's do a quick recap on analyzing universal themes and bring this all together. So here is your ultimate checklist for this standard. When you approach a text, first, you've got to determine its theme or central idea, that big, overarching human concept. Next, you analyze its development. You track how the author uses specific details, plot events, and dialogue to build that idea up. And finally, you take those skills global. You compare and contrast how completely different cultures approach those exact same universal themes through their own unique lenses. At the end of the day, it's really all about looking past the surface to find exactly what connects us all. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. What shared human experience will you discover in your next reading? Keep these analytical tools sharp, always look for those deeper themes, and enjoy the global journey. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.